I'm Ruth, Violet's mom, and I'm here to talk about glue batik for making colorful fabric squares for our class quilt. This is a method where we use regular washable school glue and regular acrylic paint watered down to make fabric that is dyed with a design on it. We draw our design in glue, paint over it, and when it's all dry, we wash the glue out, and you end up with this. Next. The first step is to create your drawing. Here I have cardboard covered with wax paper and a piece of fabric. So I'm going to draw my design in pencil. You don't have to, but it might help you do something a little bit more accurately. Here's my ladybug. And then the next step is to trace that in glue. So I'm going to go over all the lines with glue, and if I end up with a little hole, or a skinny spot, I'll just go over that, and I'll do all of these little parts. Next. After letting my glue design dry all the way, either by drying it overnight or I've been rushing it by putting it in an oven at 190 degrees and just letting it dry out for 15 minutes. After I've done that, then I come and I add the paint. It's important that it's watered down, otherwise it will become stiff on the page. So I think for our quilt, we're going to want to have an array of colors. And I think a good idea would be if we have the background, everybody has an assigned color for the background, and then they make the center sort of a complementing color. So this one here is a little squirrel. I'm going to get a little bit of brown paint on my brush. And I paint it on. Oh, I forgot. I think I'll have the kids start by getting their fabric completely wet, because when the fabric is wet first, if you'll notice, then when I put some paint on, it spreads out better. Whereas if I paint on a dry area, it kind of stays in a clump. So I've been getting my fabric wet with a brush little bit by little bit. I think it's going to be faster just to get the whole fabric wet and go from there. So I would paint this whole thing, the background, the squirrel. This one, you can barely see the design because I did it in clear glue, but it gives me a good idea of the colors. If you do it in blue gel glue, you can really easily see your design when you're about to paint, but maybe it's hard to imagine what it would look like without blue lines. After my acrylic paint has dried, either again in the oven at 190 degrees for maybe 15 minutes or just overnight, that's what we'll probably do in class, it's time to wash out the glue. So you can let your fabric soak in some water, maybe scrub it together like that to get the glue off, or maybe, probably for the class, we'll just take all of them and toss them in the washing machine and see if it all comes out that way. But in the end, then you have a nice painted design. Probably a parent will iron them all at some point, but I want to take a look at these designs and show you what worked and what didn't work. This one I feel works really well. I based the design off of this little owl necklace. I think it works really well because the paint color is much darker than the fabric color. There are some other ones where the paint that I used was so light that you can barely see the design coming through. This was a lady, and then I drew her face in at the end with a fabric pen. So the same was true for this gecko, where it's kind of hard to see. Then I drew in an eye and a tongue with the fabric marker, although I don't really like that. This one came out really well because it was dark paint against lighter fabric. This one I kind of like, even though it's a little hard to see because I use very light color paint. And if you'll notice, this fabric is plain on one side and the other side has the painted design. and the painted design doesn't take up the color as much as the fabric. So each fabric will be a little bit different. On this one you can barely see, I did a snail, and I actually did a bird here. You can sort of see it maybe if I hold it up against the light, but otherwise it's essentially invisible. And this was just a design, also almost invisible, because for these ones I didn't use paint that was dark enough. It's easier when you're doing it over white, although this cat I made over white and it was still kind of washed out, and I went in and I did the eyes and the nose with marker. So that's that. I think we're going to make a great quilt. The end.